Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Oh my god, 20 years of Devil May Cry, 20 years of that series, 20 years of incredibly stylish action, among the best of the best, if not the best. Depends on who you talk to, but it's definitely out there. And here's the thing 20 years of it being utterly ridiculous and over the top, and I remain here for it. So, in this video, I will talk about how Devil May Cry is one of my favorite series of all time, and if you've been following this channel for a while, that is not going to be a shock to you. But I want to take you on my journey through Devil May Cry because it's an amazing series, full of action, great characters, great story, and a lot of math. In any case, I like it for several reasons, and I want to take you on a journey, about how I came across it and how that's actually been pretty impactful in my life with the series. Um, so yeah, we're gonna get into it, but keep in mind, I'm going to go ham on this one. Like, just assume all the spoilers for everything Devil May Cry. All the spoilers. Without further ado, then, let's rock. All right, so with Devil May Cry, um, I had heard the series, and from several people, I had heard it. I had seen clips, and over time, I discovered more clips. I saw and heard more awesome things about it, and so eventually, I got a PlayStation 2. I could not afford one for a while, but eventually, I was able to do so, and I got two games for it to start. Surprisingly, one of them wasn't Metal Gear Solid 2. That was my third game for the PS2. But those two games that I got from the jump, Devil May Cry and Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. And with Devil May Cry, seeing eclipse are one thing, right? Playing that game, that's a whole entire other experience. And oh my god, when I started playing it, it blew my mind. The action was just so fun, so fluid, so stylish. It was really cool. Devil May Cry, that first one, it was full of such atmosphere and a lot of themes and tones carry over in one form or another, game to game, even if they might feel different in some cases. But no matter if some other things are largely different, the combat at its core is something that has largely been improved and added to over time. And I know there are a few games in the series that people are not a fan of, and we'll get to them because out of those like main six games, Devil May Cry 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the reboot, throughout all those games, I've played them all. So we're going to talk about all of them as we go on. So back to that first one though. I played Devil May Cry. I played it a lot. I played it. I beat it. I beat it again. I beat it on higher difficulties. And oh my god, when I first played it, there were some cool things that were happening, right? Because I think the way it went is you can beat it on normal, and then you beat it on a higher difficulty, and eventually you unlock the legendary Dark Knight. And it's like you're not playing as Sparta per se, but you're kind of playing as Sparta. It's kind of weirdly weird because he's when Dante's in that mode, his hair is like gelled back. He has a monocle, the purple jacket, and again, it's supposed to, I guess, be like the human form of Sparta because his devil trigger turns him into Sparta, and he has different weapons, in like that form, right? Well, different names rather, and different music for the battle music. In any case, you can play, that mode, and then you can eventually get to the point where you do Dante Must Die, and it is brutal, but you beat that, and you get infinite Devil Trigger, and it's a thing of beauty. Devil May Cry blew my mind. And then, over time, right, I knew there was Devil May Cry 2, but I had heard and seen so many awful things, I wasn't particularly interested in it. And then one year, there was a trailer for Devil May Cry 3, and it was framed as a prequel and all that. And I saw the trailer, and it blew my freaking mind. I'm like, oh snap, yeah. And I'm like, you know what? Even though it's a prequel, even though like Devil May Cry 2 won't realistically have a large impact on that, I should probably play that. I didn't want to skip it. And also, despite all the bad stuff, I wanted to get to a point where I made that call for myself, whether it was awful or not. Um, but again, I wasn't in a rush to play it. So I did get it before I got Devil May Cry 3. And you know what? It wasn't bad. Don't get me wrong, it was nowhere near as good as Devil May Cry. And some people complain about the difficulty, but it was okay. But my thing is just like, it's not that it was a bad game, it's that at points it felt mediocre. That was my thing with it. Like the combat was okay. It was still Devil May Cry. Again, most of the people's issues with it was the difficulty. Um, and my thing is just like it wasn't horribly interesting. I did like Lucia though. I thought she was a cool character. Um, Dante, I don't know, no, one cut the same because like in the first game, um, he was rather serious throughout that. Despite what we think of as Dante, in that first game, he was pretty serious for the most part, but he did crack wise. He had jokes. He'd come for people, make the bosses, angry. So it's not like he didn't have a sense of humor. Um, in the second game, Dante feels very depressed, and I think like I don't know, it just is interesting, and around that time, like around that time, I think around that time, I don't know, things are jumbling together in my mind, but there was a Devil May Cry anime. Um, just putting that out there. And I don't have a lot to say about that actually, except for like I thought the action was pretty reasonable. Um, it was not my favorite thing in the world, but again, it's one of those things where much like Devil May Cry 2, the anime was like kind of mediocre at points. But not bad. Like I could watch it, and it was competently made to say the least. And I really dig the opening theme song. That being said, back to the games. So Devil May Cry 3 came out March 2005. I forget the exact date. I want to say the 17th, but I would have to look it up to confirm it. But first off, I want to get it. I was 17 at the time. And I kid you not, I got carded. I got carded for the game. And I didn't have my school ID, which would have at least said my grade. Um, so my mom had to get it for me, which is ridiculous because I was old enough to get the game, but they thought I was too young. And fun fact, I got carded almost a decade later when I was 26, but I had the ID that time, and I was just like, seriously, come on. But anyway, back to the night that I got it. So I get Devil May Cry 3, and it's just like, oh my god. Just every part of that game, just awesome. I've talked about that game so much on this channel, so much in general. It is one of my favorite games of all time. Devil May Cry 5 sometimes like shares that spot because it's awesome, but it feels like more of a continuation of Devil May Cry 3 than anything else in that series, if that makes sense. If you played the games, you know what I'm talking about. When we talk about Devil May Cry at length, we'll get there. But back to Devil May Cry 3. Every part of that game like hit me. So fun fact, like there were so many complaints about Devil May Cry 2 being like easier in the West that there was a whole thing where they changed difficulties for us over here. So like our normal was actually hard, our easy was normal, and it's just like brutal. But anyway, with Devil May Cry 3, at first, it was difficult. And you get Devil Trigger much later in the game. If you played, you know, right? You don't get it till mission 7. Um, and it's just like, so you struggle with some things. You work your way up. And can we talk about Cerberus for a second? Can we talk about Cerberus? Okay, so if you play Devil May Cry 3, you know how that fight is. This is brutal. It's like I'm sure as many people just put that controller down and just not go back to it. But I was like, no, I'm going to win, and I eventually did. But it was a tough fight. And I was just like, for me, it was very funny because like Dante was egging on Cerberus, and it's just like, dude, Dante, cutscene Dante, why you starting trouble, man? I have to play you, and you done pissed off this demon. Come on, man. Um, but yeah, so it was a very fun game, and once I got past that point, I was so thrilled with winning. And one of the things that I like about Devil May Cry 3 and Devil May Cry as a whole is that like if you are having difficulties, right, it's like it doesn't really make fun of you or anything like that, but it kind of dares you to be good because if you're having difficulty, then it's like okay, well maybe I'll focus on fighting this opponent or fighting that opponent, building up some orbs, getting some power ups, refining my skills, refining my timing, refining my combos, which for the record, all that involves math. Yeah, it does. Um, but seriously speaking, though, it does, and I think that's really cool too because it's just like Devil May Cry isn't just stylish action; it's stylish math, and I think that's the thing of beauty. And in Devil May Cry 3, it's just everything is just like oh my god, it is ridiculous and over top in the best way. And so one of the things about the like earlier game that I was a little conflicted on, but it just ultimately ended up landing is that like Dante, like young Dante, he's so brash, so arrogant, and yet, I mean, I feel like you spend time with that character and you kind of want him to continue because like here's the thing: not only is young Dante like pretty funny even with that arrogance. Like he almost always gets some comeuppance, even though he's very skilled. Like something will happen in a cutscene where it's just like it makes him look foolish. But what I do like is like he don't care. He don't care one bit. He'll be arrogant. He'll be over the top. He'll do something ridiculous. He'll get that comeuppance, and he'll just keep on chugging along. And I dug that. Um, but another thing that I dug about that game, and you all, if you play Devil May Cry, if you watch my videos, you knew this was gonna happen. Virgil and everything about Virgil in that game. Because Virgil is a fun character. He's a character that I identify with a lot. And just to be clear, I identify with his motivation, not the extent to which he goes to achieve his goals. Um, because it's just like when I think about like video game characters, like Virgil and Silence from like Horizon Zero Dawn are probably my favorite character. Virgil covets power, Silence covers knowledge, and ultimately they're the same thing, and they both covet the other thing either way, and they both go through utter um, extents to reach that, and they're both really competent. And back to Virgil, just that dude is cool. He's one of my favorite parts, if not my favorite part about the game. Um, well, I mean, just God, there's so much about that game that I enjoy. So with Virgil, though, I like that like he's very motivated, but just like to insane degrees. But what I like is like so Virgil was not a new character, not in a sense, right? Because here's the thing. Back in Devil May Cry, one of the cool things was about the bosses. While those bosses repeated, it did annoy me like it would in some other games because like they always post some new challenge, and of those bosses, Virgil was one of them in the form of Nello Angelo in those games, right? And those were some seriously fun fights. But he didn't get a chance to have a lot of character. Three fixes that, right? They take this cool character and this idea of the rival character, and they flesh him out. He was always Dante's brother. I think if you've played that first one, that's not immediately clear, but you start to put the pieces together. And I don't think they ever explicitly state it, but they heavily imply it. Um, and so here's the thing. So it's just great because he is just egging Dante on throughout that entire game. And Dante and you as the player gets better because you fight Virgil, and Virgil realistically will body you like he bodies Dante's in the cutscene, like at least at first. And throughout the course of the game, you get better and he gets better. And as you get better, Dante gets better. And I think it's all cool because well, one, rival characters can be incredibly motivating, right? And here what happens is like it's using math to motivate you really because um you have this combatant that can pull a lot of the same tricks that you can and some similar ones. They can rival you. They have more health than you. They have their own combos, their own timing, and they're keeping pace with you in a way that other bosses are not. And they push you, and you have to be on it in every step. And is you refine your combos? Is you buy your power ups? Is you anticipate your opponent? You are using math all the way. And I've talked about just all that stuff in various videos, so I won't harp on it here because I want to continue to go on my journey with you. To take you, well, rather take you on this journey. But I bring it up though because it's such a cool thing. And Virgil gets fleshed out as well as Dante. Dante isn't one note in this game. And what I really like is that this game cements that ultimately, right, you have these brothers, these twins. They were always who they were going to be, but at the same time, they are shaped. They're shaped by one singular event. And this ends up resonating throughout the entire series. They are shaped by the death of their mother and what happened on that day that she died. You have these two characters who are dealing with trauma and very different ways and also similar ways, if that makes sense. Because they're ultimately, you know, finding a way to deal with that pain. And what I also like about this game is like Dante does get a bit more heroic as the game goes on, but I mean, Dante isn't really a hero in the traditional sense. Like he saves the world, he does that stuff, sure. But I mean, his motivation throughout most of that game is to fight Virgil. And I get it, and that's cool. And a lot of times, like you'll still have that motivation in later games. So I think that gets interesting because, like, again, Dante does want to save the world, but he's also more motivated by fighting his brother, and that ends up being a big focal point in the series. Virgil is ultimately the big bad in that series, like no matter how you cut it, and I think that's interesting. And I think three really cemented what was already there. Um, Also, it's just kind of a weird thing where like the numbered games have Virgil in them, and the even ones don't. It's kind of strange, but yeah, Devil May Cry 3. I cannot say enough positive things about that game. The gameplay is great. The stories are great. The story is great. The bosses are great. Because right, not only are they fun, and the fights push you, but you know more often than not you will get their souls as a weapon. And I mean, the weapons themselves are great. One weapon is an electric guitar. Actually has an axe. The axe is an axe, and it shoots lightning, and that's awesome because it's literally an electric guitar. And I think that's really cool. Among other things, it pushes you at every step. It's got so much replay value. And I just had a blast, and the story really resonated with me because, like, some people don't think Devil May Cry has a deep story, but it's just like, I mean, it's always been about family, and I feel like Devil May Cry did such a good job of showing not only that it's about family through Dante and Virgil, but also Lady and Arkham. And there's the idea of family trauma and doing what's right. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think that's a cool thing. And again, like Virgil is just awesome in that game. Dante too, and Lady herself, she just comes out swinging. Like one of the things that I like is that Dante, he meets Lady for the first time, and like the first thing she does is she shoots him in the head. And what I like about that is that when it happens, he recovers, and so she's like, so he's not a human. So it's like, you shot this dude, because at that point, right, you've seen her and she'd been killing demons, but it's like, you shot that dude thinking he was human at first. Oh man. But yeah, so she's great, and I hate Arkham, but like he's a fun villain because he's so hateable. um but yeah, so Devil May Cry 3, it is not only a great Devil May Cry game, but a great game, and it has done a lot for me in a sense because like in addition to just having so many hours that I poured into that game, that I've gotten a lot out of in return in terms of fun. um I've always been ridiculous and over the top. I always have been, but Devil May Cry 3 encouraged me to just continue to do that, but even more, because that game was so confident in how ridiculous and over the top it was. It's a beautiful thing. Um, so yeah, that's I've said a lot about Devil May Cry 3. So how about Devil May Cry 4? How do I feel about that? So because at this point, right, I'm getting the Devil May Cry games is they're getting released, and with Devil May Cry 4, um, I got that, and you know what? It's a good game. It is. It does so many things right. I do think it feels unfinished in spots, and that sucks. But it's still good. I just feel like it could be great. One of the cool things that it does is it introduces Nero to the picture, who's heavily implied to be Virgil's son, and later that is confirmed. Um, but Nero is a fun character. Like he's got a lot of emotion. And it's just interesting to see how he reacts to different characters as the game progresses. And so throughout that game, you play as like Nero, and you play as Dante. And also, I feel like the thing with Nero is like when you have like Virgil as Nello Angelo in that first one, I feel like that was definitely like a translation error, and that should have been Nero Angelo. But just I think about that sometimes. So that's just how my mind is. But anyway, so with Nero, his play style is fun, but I do think they kind of shortchange him in his own game because like he does so much that first half, but then the second half is just like Dante pretty much cleaning up his mess, and then by that I mean it's like you're pretty much cleaning up Nero's mess that you made while you were playing with him unintentionally, and you're cleaning it up as Dante. um, I didn't think Sanctus was a good villain, but it served its purpose. But I think it was a fun game overall. Like one of the coolest parts that they what was that? Don't know. But anyway, one of the cool things that they introduced in Devil May Cry 4 is they switched how they deal with styles because in Devil May Cry 3, you pick a style and you could change that at the statues, and it was the same with your weapons. But Devil May Cry 4 kicked it up, switched some things around. Like not only could you switch your weapons more on the fly instead of choosing two at once for your melee and your guns, and Dante didn't have a lot in this game, so it worked out well. It was easy enough to balance, I imagine. But so there's that, right? And so he's able to do that. And wait, I said that wrong. So you can switch your weapons on the fly by cycling through them with the shoulder buttons, and you can also deal with style on the fly using the directional pads, and it's super useful. It is awesome. Um, and so it's just like it improves the quality of life, and that's something that returns in Devil May Cry 5, and something that's used in the Devil May Cry 3 port for the Switch. And so it was an awesome addition. In any case, it's fun. There's a special edition of that game that I would like play later on, which did feature Virgil, even though he wasn't in the game, and it also allowed you to play as Lady and Trish for the first time in the series. Um, Also, with Devil May Cry 2, that reminds me, you got to play as Lucia, and that was cool. Um, but she never returned to the series. Also, there is a special edition for Devil May Cry 3, and you get to play as Virgil, and that was awesome. And that's where that kind of started, and then that returns in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition. But the interesting thing about that is like with the Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, I think that came out in 2015, like 7 years after Devil May Cry 4 came out. Whereas I think with the Special Edition for 3, that was like a year apart. So anyway, I feel like looking at the time on my video is getting a little long too. So I'm gonna finish up saying some things about Devil May Cry 4. I'm gonna pause for a second so my video doesn't start to clunk out, and then I'm gonna talk about Devil May Cry 5, and then just some other things about Devil May Cry that I feel, and then I'll wrap it up from there. Okay, so Devil May Cry 4, again, it's a good game, not a great game. They did a lot of cool things that were interesting, that were new, that were different. And come on, you got to fight Dante for like the first time, and that was awesome. And by that, I mean like you actually get to fight Dante. Because I feel like that's not what was happening in Devil May Cry 3 when you were playing as Virgil, and that was a missed opportunity. But anyway, so yeah, Devil May Cry 4, I do like that. I've played that more than once, and it is definitely a good game. And I still again argue that it could have been even greater, but it is what it is, and I don't regret what we got. It was a completed game. It just felt unfinished at spots. But hey, I think if you can play a game and you can enjoy it, it's not too bad. So I'll bring this part of the video to close. It'll probably take a second for you. For me, it might be a minute or so. I'm gonna make some adjustments, but I'll see you very soon. Don't know why I said it like that, but we're gonna keep it rolling. I don't know. It's like 1 o'clock a.m. I'm getting tired, allegedly. Oh no, I'll be back. Hello, and we're back. So I want to talk about Devil May Cry 5. Like I really do. But before we get to that, I think we gotta talk about the reboot. Now I maintain that there's not a bad Devil May Cry game, and that includes the reboot. It is not a bad game. It is much more much better than any of us thought it was going to be. Don't get me wrong, it ain't a great game, but we're gonna get into it. So, Devil May Cry 5, if you didn't know, came out in 2019, and this is 11 years after Devil May Cry 4 came out, which is kind of insane, am I right? But in the interim, back in 2013, we got the Devil May Cry reboot, DMC, right? Oof. Let's back it up. So, Devil May Cry 4 came out, and from my understanding, it didn't hit the sale numbers that Capcom wanted it to do. So they wanted to mix some things up for the next game. They didn't want to not have Dante, but they wanted to revamp Dante, and so they hand over the reins to like Ninja Theory, right? But they tell him to make Dante as different as possible. Now in 2010 or around that era, we see our first look at new Dante in this new game, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it looked like trash. I don't know what they were thinking. It looked awful. So they retooled, reteamed, and in 2013 we got a better idea of this version of Dante. Now, when they came time to like show that before the game came out, it looked much better. And then the game came out, and while the story takes some crazy turns, and not always in a good way, the gameplay is still pretty good. It's still pretty refreshing. It's not always as fast paced as you're used to, but you can get into it. You can get into the flow. They do some interesting things. They have some fun with the platforming, and there are a few bosses that are actually pretty cool. I'm trying to remember the character's name. Like he was a news anchor. I think Bob Barker in the game. In any case, his battle was very fun, very colorful. It mixed it up. It did some different things. It is amazing, and I think if nothing else, you can't take that battle away from DMC. Um, and they did some things that would later impact Devil May Cry 5, like the way they had the music playing, like it would get more intense as you got more style points, as you increase your style meter. They kept that among other things. They kept a few enemies too, stuff like that, when they did Devil May Cry 5. And so that's what I kind of meant earlier. There's like not a bad Devil May Cry game, and there's always something that they do that like works. And it was a fun game. I will not deny that. Then the story was lacking. There are parts of it that are nice, but like it felt like they just wanted to make this new Dante an edge lord just to be an edge lord. And I feel like there's a difference between this Dante being arrogant and the Devil May Cry 3 version of Dante being arrogant. Because it's like, when I look back at DMC, and it's like treated as this prequel reboot thing, it's like, this is like a horrible version of Devil May Cry 3. Like, the gameplay is still nice, but the story and characters and what they're doing, it's like they took things that worked about Devil May Cry 3 and then they just kind of, they messed them up. So, um, in Devil May Cry 3, Dante is also arrogant, but he's actually funny, and he gets some comeuppance. Um, Reboot Dante, it's like he doesn't really get that comeuppance exactly, and he's not actually funny when he's being an arrogant piece of work. Like he's like he's a jerk through and through, and it's just like it's not fun. And then there's a scene where you're in the streets or whatever, and there's a wig that comes and it hits new Dante, and he looks more like the Dante that we're accustomed to. He's like not in a million years. But as we discover later in the game, the way his double trigger works, he ends up looking like that Dante because his jacket goes red, his hair grows white, and it's just like so. I mean, if that's where they were going, why include that joke? And also, it's just like the people playing this game are probably going to be Devil May Cry fans that decided to give this a chance anyway. So like, why do that? Why be that person or team? But anyway, so Devil May Cry DMC, right? Like, it's not without its merits. But I'm done talking about that game though. Now to Devil May Cry 5. So 6 years after, sorry, the reboot, and 4 years after the special edition for Devil May Cry 4 comes Devil May Cry 5. I didn't even hear about it, and I think this is the case for a lot of people till 2018. Now, let me tell you something about this game. Let me tell you something about this game. It's a blast. When it came out, pretty sure it's March 8th, 2019. And I knew it was coming at that point. And at this point, right, they had spoiled that Virgil was in it. And yes, I just did the same thing, but I'm covered because back at the beginning of the video, I said spoilers for everything Devil May Cry. But seriously, they spoiled it, and you know what? I didn't care. That just got me more hyped. So Devil May Cry 5 comes out, and here's the thing: I had vacation days because at that time, right, I was running a math and science tutoring center, and I was teaching, but I didn't have any classes to teach, and things were pretty slow, like on Friday. So I took that day off in advance. I planned things out, and I took that day off to play me some Devil May Cry 5, and I had some pizza, and it was a blast. It was the best. Yeah. So, where do I even begin? So, Devil May Cry 5 is an excellent game. It took everything that worked about Devil May Cry and it upped it. It is ridiculous. It is over the top, and also at the same time quite serious at points. Um, it takes the rivalry between Dante and Virgil, and it makes it the center point of the game. And it's just like it is a crowning achievement to me, because they do it so well, and at the same time, it's like all the other characters are affected by this fight, and it's really cool. I would like to say that Virgil remains one of my favorite characters, but while he was a jerk in 3, he is an absolute jerk in this game, and I'm not even mad because he comes back and he comes back hard. Um, so here's the thing. It's such a fun game. And you switch between Dante, Nero, and V, and V is part of Virgil, much like Urizen is. And with Urizen, I don't know. He was one of those characters where it's just like you don't know much about him. He's mysterious, and he's like, okay, this fight is interesting. I want to see where this goes. And then when you find out the bigger picture, it's like, interesting. And I just like that, you have Urizen and you have V, and they represent the demon part and the human part of Virgil, respectively. And I like that despite them being quite different, at the end of the day, they were bonded by one single thing: a desire for more power. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, so I really dig the story in 5. I really dig the characters. I will say I would have liked to have seen more from Lady and Trish. They deserve better in that game. All right, that's one critical point I would say. Nico is a good introduction though. Nero also calms down significantly, and I like his back and forth with Nico. And yeah, so I feel like he's a lot more emotionally mature, a lot less brash, and that's cool. And Dante, like one of the things that I like is like so Dante's usually cool, usually pretty laid back. But there's a lot of points in this game that yes, he's still that, yes, he still can crack a joke, but he is rattled by this situation, and I like it. It's cool. Um, but you know what I haven't quite mentioned yet? The gameplay. The gameplay, yeah. In Devil May Cry 5, it is like the peak. Like, because, so Devil May Cry started off great. It had some pretty solid gameplay. And two, they added some things like they got better with the juggling. They added Rebellion, which became a staple. And they added a few more things. Devil May Cry 3 upped the ante, right? It changed how you do things in a critical way, right? Like it added the styles into the mix. It made the combat more tight. It increased the complexity of some of the combos. Then Devil May Cry 4 comes along, and while Dante's still pretty much doing his thing, it does add Nero in a new way of play, and it also adds some slice of life improvements, or what did I say? Slice of life, quality of life improvements to the picture, right? So each step you're adding that, and there's like some things in that they were fine in that reboot, or like things that were cool that they borrowed that they added to the picture, and then Devil May Cry 5 comes along, and it adds just a bevy of like just oh my god, bevy of combos and ways to switch between them. And there's a point where you can unlock um, freestyle mode. So at that point, you can take all the weapons that you've accumulated in that game, melee, and long range, all that stuff, right? And you can pretty much use everything at once, right? And it's just wild because the possibilities and levels of combinations you could do with Dante in that mode are utterly insane. And not only do you have like Dante operating at his zenith, you have Nero with his Devil Bringer and the different types of ammunition that comes with that, right? Because you have things like the stuff, the arm that shocks you, sure, but he has a little rocket arm that you can attach to him and you can ride it, and it's amazing. And I mean, if you didn't think it was amazing, I question if you have a soul. But I mention it because it's cool. It's really, really cool. And then V, I wasn't sure how I would feel about V's combat, but it was refined. It was cool. It was different. It was like you had to be exact, and at the same time, it's very chaotic. And then here's the thing: like originally, you didn't get to play as Virgil, but I mean, you knew it was coming. And so when they did announce the Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, he was included. But here's the thing, that was on PS5. So on PS4, if you had Devil May Cry 5 already, it's like you couldn't get a Special Edition. However, I could live with that because Virgil was still a downloadable character. Like, he was the DLC, like that. He was that content there, right? Um, and that was cool because like there was supposed to be, I think like the idea was like you had turbo mode in the special edition, and it's like okay, you didn't get that. And if you just downloaded Virgil, but like who cares, like it still flows so beautifully well. They did such a great job the first time. It's like I don't care. I got to play as Virgil, and that was awesome. And he's just stupidly broken. Virgil has always been that way, but like in the Devil May Cry 5 version of Virgil, just stupidly broken in the best way possible. And so that's yet another type of character that you could play as in that game. Now, I really would have liked to have seen, again, more Lady and more Trish, and I would have liked for them to be playable characters much like they were in 4. But that's not what we got, which sucks. But I do like the stuff that we did get. And it's just like they told a very compelling tale, and the gameplay is just top notch just in every way. It's a beautiful, beautiful game. It is just such a great achievement in terms of action, in terms of art, in terms of math. It's fun too. And Bloody Palace was free DLC instead of just being included right from the jump. But it was free, so which is great. They didn't charge you for that, and they did charge you for like the Virgil DLC if you didn't get the special edition, like I was mentioning earlier. But who cares? It was like $5 to play as Virgil, and I got a lot of that experience, so I'm cool with it. Um, that being said, and I'm even cooler with it because like I didn't have to buy a separate special edition like you would have in the past. That being said, it's just like it's such a fun game, so much fun. I've played it a lot. It's just like, and if they never do another Devil May Cry game, that's a good spot to stop. If they do, hopefully it'll be awesome. And they probably should do one on Sparta. I'm just saying. Um, but yeah, it's such a great part to like in. And here's the thing. Um, I like the idea of like a super devil triggers because it's like it's crazy because it's like pretty much Dante's been like going because he's been going devil trigger for quite some time, but it's just like at this point if Devil Trigger was like Super Saiyan, Super Devil Trigger was like Super Saiyan 2. Although it's just like the level is so crazy and enhanced when you're in that form, you can make arguments that it's more like Super Saiyan Blue. Just like that whole other tier of power. And it's crazy. And I think it's even crazier that Virgil seems to get an equivalent and the fight that you have with Virgil and Dante is great. I like the stuff with Nero versus Virgil too because this is after he finds out Nero finds out it's his father and they do battle. But it was just like there was so much build up with the Dante and Virgil spot. But that being said, like oh my god, playing that on Dante Must Die mode, man, like just what it was crazy. But yeah, I played that game and a lot. And when I was playing it, I would talk to my class like before class started, and you know, we would talk about it, and they would be supportive. And like when I was going through Bloody Palace, they were like super supportive. It was great. Um, so yeah, Devil May Cry 5. Yeah, and see the kind of energy that I'm bringing to this is why I struggle with the placement of what's my favorite Devil May Cry because I think like just in terms of seniority, yeah, Devil May Cry 3 is going to win out more often than not, but Devil May Cry is right up there and it has claimed that spot sometimes. But I think that's worth noting because even though 5 is a sequel to the entire series and is right after 2 because the way oh sorry right after 4 um I can't believe I made that mistake. Even though it's right after 4, it feels more like a continuation of Devil May Cry 3 in terms of the whole Dante and Virgil conflict, as well as this jump in gameplay. And I was annoyed by the order that I said because I meant to say the opposite because or sorry, I meant to say yeah the opposite because the idea is like it's 3, 1, 2, 4, and 5 in terms of the order. And for a while, people didn't know if 2 or 4 came later, but there was never any reason, as far as I could tell, to say that 2 was supposed to happen after 4. So I hated that I made the mistake, but here we are. Anyway, Devil May Cry 5, just awesome, 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 awesome. And so anyway, Devil May Cry, it just is a series that I always return to, and it has impacted my life, like just encouraging me to be ridiculous and over the top. And I enjoy that it can have this rich, deep combat system, and that it could also have some really nice themes and really cool things to think about. And also that Devil May Cry has been such an influential, series. There's been so many other series that owe it a lot, and some of which are some of my favorites. And I remember like the time when I was playing Devil May Cry 5, right? A lot of other games started popping up, and the two that were like pretty close in some ways to that to Devil May Cry were like God of War and like the Ninja Gaiden reboot of that era. Like and they both were great games, but it's just like I definitely felt like that influence from Devil May Cry because if they all came out around the same time, but like at that point, Devil May Cry 5, sorry, Devil May Cry 3 had came out, but there were two other Devil May Cries, so um, I don't think it's a jump to say that they were influenced by it. And then I think about like Bayonetta, and that absolutely hasn't been influenced. Like I feel like Bayonetta and Devil May Cry credit for each other. And if you were wondering and didn't already know, the CEO of Platinum Games that created Bayonetta, he was the dude who originally um, created Devil May Cry. Him and his team. So it's not a shock that a lot of Platinum games borrow heavily on that style of gameplay, and they do their own thing with it. But there are elements that I noticed that they borrow from Devil May Cry games over the years, and likewise, Devil May Cry borrow from them. And I think that's kind of a cool thing. I don't know if discussions are actually had about that sort of stuff, but it's just interesting to note. And speaking of things that are interesting to note, if you didn't know, Devil May Cry wouldn't exist without Resident Evil. Because the idea was like, right, Hideki Kamiya, who created Devil May Cry, he was working on Resident Evil 4. And, instead of Dante, it would have been like a version of Leon, something like that, right? And it proved to be very, very different gameplay and very, very different, feel to the point where they're like, okay, yeah, this isn't like Resident Evil, but like we could turn this into its own IP, and we got Devil May Cry as a result. And at the same time, we would later get Resident Evil 4, which is cool. And it wouldn't exist in that form if not for the departure. and like the creative direction of that. So we got two great games out of a decision to mix up some things from Resident Evil 4. That being said, in terms of games that are also influenced by Devil May Cry, so speaking of Devil May Cry, and speaking of Hideki Kamiya and Platinum Games and all that stuff, Nier Automata, my favorite game of all time. It's such a brilliant game, and it's a collaboration between Square and Platinum Games. And the combat, very similar to Devil May Cry. You know, they have their own spin on it, but it's just like it's stuff that I can get behind, right? So I like that because in some of my favorite games, you can still see the Devil May Cry impact. And I do like some drastically different games, but there's definitely ones like Nier Automata and Bayonetta, stuff like that, that definitely owe a lot to Devil May Cry, and I enjoy them. And also, like, while I have not always enjoyed the story of God of War up until the reboot, sequel sort of deal. The gameplay has always been dope, and again, that's been heavily influenced by Devil May Cry. I'm not sure if people have admitted that or not, but like, come on, there's no way that it isn't. Anyway, Devil May Cry. Well, I was about to say five, but Devil May Cry is an incredible series through and through. I like the action, I like the map, I like the art, I like the characters, the stories, the weapons, the Devil Trigger. I like it all. And I just, if they never make another one, I'll be okay with it. But at the same time, if they do, I'm open to it. I mean, I guess you could argue that they have like the peak of combat coming out, but that's as far as I could tell, kind of like a rehashing of like Devil May Cry 3 in a sense. I don't know nearly enough about that, but I want to look into that more. And I think it's also just for the phone, or it will be. And that's a whole nother thing. I'd be curious to see how that worked. Anyway, in terms of like the main games, I'd be open to some things. But yeah, Devil May Cry. If somehow you watch this and you dug it and you have not played Devil May Cry, you should. And if you watch this and you've played Devil May Cry, you should play it again. Any of them, especially 3 and 5. Although, like, that first one isn't bad to revisit, and 4 is pretty decent. And I mean, 2, you could always get another chance if you don't like it. And the reboot, again, it has its merits. You can give it a chance if you don't like it. I don't know. You should play all the Devil May Cry. Play all the Devil May Cries. I had fun with this video. So yeah, 20 years. 20 years of Devil May Cry. 20 years of like ridiculous and over the top action in the best way possible. 20 years of a lot of fun. 20 years of rock. I'll see you in the next video. Professor Prime out.